So, yeah. So, anti-natal, I love this old thing. This is from when I was 8 years old. I got this blanket in Berlin, Germany. My mom was in the military. So it's a lovely, it's a bit ripped up now. But I love ripped up old, great cloth made of things. So, antinatalism, yeah, well, I might be, well, let me put it this way. First of all, I think the logic of the antinatalists is wrong. Secondly, I think it's funny that even if it's right, as long as I don't accept it, I win and it's impotent, right? I either am logically right or just by believing that, it's impotent. I think that's kind of funny. Of course, I feel a dedication to logic and reason, and so I study it. Is it really wrong? Yeah, it is really wrong. I am worse than that, though, for Gary. I don't worship the DNA, but I do have a resolve. I am terminally optimistic. I will choose to survive, at least philosophically. Choose to survive in any situation that I can still choose to survive in any situation that I can still find interesting. Any problem that I have which seems worth solving and has some potential to solve, I will try to solve. And this is exactly Gary's fear. And I understand the fear because, it is kind of, why do humans reproduce when in captivity? Well, I don't know. I've never been in that position. But yeah, I could see doing that. Having a kid to be a revolutionary, totally justifiable to me. Plus, you guys say, ooh, suffering's an objective wrong. No, I've used this example in a few comments. But, if a Nazi breaks a toe kicking a gypsy in jail, then it's not an objective wrong, the suffering that Nazi goes through. Sorry, I don't think so. Now, I don't say that abstractly. I had a childhood that was very confusing for me, and it was not always directly enjoyable, but I always managed to enjoy it through enjoyment of being interested in things. When something's really difficult, it sucks, but it's really a lot easier to be interested. Now, Professor Anton, of all people, no offense, Professor Anton, between the lines there, maybe a little, but of all people, made a really good video. He coined a phrase that I think is really interesting about the consciousness of beings, bringing in the consciousness part of natalism and antinatalism and the rest, which is that these things that, now Professor Anton is one of these people that doesn't even believe his dog really loves in the sense that he loves. He acknowledges that maybe it does. He is honest and gives his take on it. And yet even he acknowledges that as you go down the tree of life, though he doesn't want to be too specific. I mean, somebody that questions it at the dog level doesn't like to be too specific, naming plants and paramecium like I will. But a kind of conscious behavior that we could call irritability. I find that very interesting because while it's difficult to say something loves or this or that or the other, something behaving as though it's been irritated, that pretty much spans the tree of life. Now, not every single single-celled organism has been observed in irritability, but this is difficult. The difficulty of interacting with them, and the fact that no, science hasn't actually gotten to every single thing. But in general, you can see, like I said before when I was talking about the recoil of a living thing as opposed to a floating physical thing, even if it's dynamic and has somewhat agent-like behavior in some sense, some arguable sense. One of the things you see in real living things is recoil. They touch something, they don't just bounce into it, they act like, ooh, there's something there. And they recoil, and it's the irritability. Now the thing about Gary's antinatalism that he just doesn't really understand, doesn't really understand, doesn't really understand, doesn't really understand, doesn't really understand. You know, and it's just fucked up. You know, saying that I don't care. This is what pisses me off with all the antinatalists that, as far as I can see, you know, they're very much, they care. Like, I don't care. Of course I care. And even to the point of being willing to do natural engineering, which, you know, it's, some people could argue that it's playing God to even question these things of, like, help the suffering, you know, like the idea that there ought to be rangers there to put that elephant out of its misery. That elephant that had the broken legs eaten alive. You know, just to put it out of... I would hope that if a rancher was riding by, he would put that elephant out of its misery. But, you know, to actually have that be like a goal, or more sophisticated things, you know, for the pleasure of natural animals. Just, I believe we can cross that line. And I realize that it's a fundamentally deep level. It makes me almost like an antinatalist saying that you can touch that, and that I do not respect nature as it is. Well, I respect nature as it is, but I do not accept it. We can change nature, which makes me more in agreement with antinatalists on a lot of issues than I am with, say, the mainstream ordinary view. But someone like Gary can't even see that at all. It's totally, no, you're evil, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, hello, you can't acknowledge even the littlest thing if you're Gary. And it's a funny thing because of all of the positions that Gary has, he represents antinatalism more of a core way, and yet there's people going, well, he doesn't know, no, I always felt this way before, and say that you're all just like Gary, but this inability to see other people have compassion, that's a serious problem. It's a weird kind of emotional separation when you can't see. Like, everybody in this discussion believes that it is wrong to put a hardship on someone else for a personal pleasure. So you get 100% of the pleasure and they get 100% of the hardship. And you don't know that because you think you're talking to the people out there. And what I'm saying, the people out there that do think that way, because there's plenty, some of whom will admit it. But I'm saying that those people are the problem. That attitude is the problem. Not necessarily as people, but that attitude in those people is the problem. Right? That's the problem. When you eliminate scams and schemes and tricks and snake oil sales and whatnot that export the hardship on someone else and keep, then you have personally chosen hardships. You know, and I'm keep being called an idiot in my eyeball. I don't know why, but this particular eyeball, called an idiot, when in reality you are not seeing that this fundamental difference of when you take a hardship on yourself for a goal you value, even if it's silly, like playing a game, then that's all fair and good. You can only choose for yourself. There isn't an objective metric. Yeah, suffering is bad, even though it's all subjective, it's bad in some sense, but it's not objectively bad. Why? Because if a Nazi breaks his foot kicking somebody in a concentration camp, thank fucking God he at least breaks his toe and feels some pain. That's not objectively wrong. And if you think so, you are a bleeding heart to the degree that shows that no matter what you believe in extreme, you have some sort of tendency. Because things should not be believed in extreme. Even the absolute compassion for all pain. Because there's some people do some things when they get some pain. It's just, they're just desserts. It's just the way it ought to be. And the problem is that when people that should be getting those just desserts export them over to other people like they're slaves, and that's the problem. And you're not quick enough to see that because you're so obsessed with convincing everybody that life is shit, which would be a terrible thing for people to think if they're trying to do some good in the world. Look at Gary. He's like, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to shovel sewage. I live in a nice community, and I am American. I don't have to make things better. It should already be better. Yeah, fuck that bullshit. Whatever. You know. Anyway, just because of this, we're the only ones that care, it makes me feel like, well, actually, you're not the only ones that care. 2, your logic is foolish. And 3, it doesn't matter because your philosophy is impotent. Ha ha. Okay, that's the cool part. Your philosophy is impotent. Ha ha. Because, oh, you're the only ones that care. No, you're not. No, you're not. Even though I've given credit to Gary for being an activist. And Greytex is all like, oh, yeah, ha ha. And then Gary goes off and goes, I don't care about that shit. Well, you know what? Good, because that makes more consistent sense. Because your philosophy is about how life's shit anyway. I don't believe you're going to keep working on life. You know? So, I don't know what you're worshiping. I'm not going to accuse you of worshiping something. And I don't care if you consider my acceptance of my situation as worship. I do not fucking care. I don't care. I'm interested in something besides your judgment, which is what's happening next. If you're not, then whatever. If you are, but you regret that you are because it's a bias, whatever. Your problem.